Welcome to Canada's podcast.
Hello and welcome to Calgary's podcast with Mario Toneguzzi on Canada's Podcast Network. Joining me today is Sean Krakiwsky, who is President and CEO of Nanalysis in Calgary. Thanks for joining us today, Sean.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Let's start with talking a little bit about the company, what it is that you guys do.
Yeah, so we've miniaturized MRI machines for industrial applications, but also healthcare applications.
So tell me, what kind of applications are these used for?
Sure. So magnetic resonance is not only used in hospitals for reasons that all your audience would be familiar with, but that same technology is also used to image molecules. So if you have olive oil and you want to test to see if it's actually extra virgin olive oil, you can image the molecules and find out quite precisely. If you're a big drug company like Pfizer or Johnson & Johnson, you can image molecules in the new drug that you're developing. You might only have a very small amount of it. You put it in a glass tube about 7 inches high, 5 millimeters in diameter. And then you put it in our product, which is a toaster-sized box. And you can image the molecules in that to see if your R&D efforts are going as planned. Again, if you're designing a new drug. Of course, we seem to be in the age of cannabis. So I much prefer just a vodka martini myself, but I know others feel differently. So we have lots of customers who are in the cannabis industry that are using our product to image the molecules in their cannabis oil or whatever the case may be. So that's just a smattering of applications beyond, human beings in a very large machine in a hospital.
So how did you get into this? Well, first of all, when did the company start?
I founded the company 11 years ago.
Okay. And how did you get into this field?
Yeah, a little bit of a story to tell if you don't mind. So
go ahead.
Perhaps it's appropriate on a podcast to tell stories, I think. So about 11 years ago, a friend of mine, Dr. Michael Krakiwsky, who's also a professor of electrical engineering at the University of Calgary, called me up and he said, Sean, I want to meet you tomorrow at the Foothills Hospital in the research center. And I got something to show you. And I said, okay, well, I know you pretty well. I don't mind the short notice. So I met Michael the next day in a specialized room and he showed me this gigantic machine that had superconducting magnets and needed liquid helium and liquid nitrogen to keep those magnets cool. And he showed me what scientists were doing with this thing and got really excited about it. And I said, hey, this is very interesting. I don't know what one of these machines is, but what does this have to do with why you wanted to meet with me? And he said, well, I want to start a business and I want to miniaturize one of these things. And I said, well, what are they called? Because I didn't recognize it. And he said, well, they're called a nuclear magnetic resonance spectrometer. And they're used in all different kinds of industries, from petrochemicals to pharma, to food, law enforcement, all kinds of energy. And we can miniaturize them and sell them. And I said, well, that's fascinating. He kind of got me going. I wasn't doing anything at the time. So he kind of had me hooked. And we went for lunch and talked about it further. And we kind of started to map out what the plan would be to build the initial team and to raise money and what our go-to-market strategy would be and everything. And I said, this is fabulous. I'm definitely in. And then when we ended the meeting, he said, one more thing, Sean. He said, that machine that I showed you is exactly the same as an MRI machine. And he showed me a picture of an MRI machine. And I said, well, you don't have to show me a picture of an MRI machine. I know what those are. Everybody knows what those are. And he said, yeah, well, it's magnetic resonance technology. They use the same type of magnets, same type of liquid helium and nitrogen, and so on and so forth. They're just different applications. So we're going to miniaturize the one first that can analyze substances, in other words, image molecules in cannabis or olive oil or petrochemicals. If we can do that, we'll also be able to miniaturize these MRI machines. And they'll be so inexpensive. They'll be connected to the cloud, driven by artificial intelligence, and they'll be in every football stadium, every hockey rink. They'll be all over the place. You can put your finger in them if you think you've dislocated your knuckle during a volleyball game, or you can just put your head in them and to see if you have a concussion, and that'll be really exciting. And so that won't be our first product, but it'll be our vision, and we'll have several tangible steps along the way that will satiate investors and so on and so forth on the way to the grand vision of being able to miniaturize MRI machines and making them available for human use. And they'll be proliferated everywhere, and hopefully it'll be a different sort of regulatory environment, similar to today. How you get blood pressure feedback and that sort of thing. You don't have to go to a doctor to do that. Well, one day it's going to be the same for MRI machines. And so while that for sure was, I contacted my lawyer that very afternoon and said, okay, I want you to incorporate this company. Here's what we're doing, and so on and so forth. And Michael is on our board of directors today, that gentleman that introduced me to this topic and sort of a co-founder with me. Although he's not as active as I am, I'm basically living, breathing, and sleeping this thing. But that's the story on how this business got started.
So what were you taking at the University of Calgary? What did you take there?
So I graduated with my undergraduate degree in electrical engineering back in the early 90s.
Yeah.
And then I had a business initiative after that, and had a little bit of a successful exit that gave me some flexibility. And then I went back to do my master's degree in electrical engineering as well. And I completed that in about the year 2000. So that's where I created this relationship with Michael, who was my supervisor back in 2000, and then just became a business associate after that.
Okay, so when you look at the company from the analysis and into the future, what's your vision or what you want this company to be and where it's going?
Yeah. So we've embarked on an incredible journey to build a fully vertically integrated scientific instrumentation company, and we started from scratch. So no IP transfer from anyone. We hired the scientists and developed all the intellectual property and patents and technology platform and then products from scratch. And we're just going to continue to go in that direction. And so my vision is that, we're going to go in, we're going to build a company that, one day will go down the path towards being like a Siemens or like a Philips, at least with regards to magnetic resonance, not necessarily the sort of conglomerate aspect of it. But trading on the NASDAQ one day with 2,000 people and providing just incredible miniaturized MRI machines for people all over the planet. And so we've achieved a lot of that vision already in that, we're a global company, for example. So we sell in over 45 countries around the world. We have succeeded at miniaturizing the basic technology. And now we're just in the process of launching new product families on top of that technology platform.
What are some of the, I guess, most unique ways these are being used that you've come across?
Yeah, so these very large machines that people are used to using, right, have to be in specialized rooms with reinforced flooring. They're like mainframe computers in the old days, right? The actual user of the computer couldn't even get near the mainframe. They would submit their punch cards or whatever to a gatekeeper, and then the gatekeeper would contact them 3 days later and say, sorry, your program didn't work. There was a mistake. They'll come back again. It's kind of like that with these large magnetic resonance machines. But they're the most important technique to analyze substances. They're the most information rich. They're the most reliable. So everybody who needs a substance assessed or their molecules imaged would want to use those machines if they could. But of course, what if you need to have them in a mobile lab where you're driving around? And so you can't put those giant machines in a mobile lab. Well, you can put our instruments in a mobile lab. In fact, we have a publicly disclosed partnership with the German police in Bonn, where they're using it to quickly analyze illicit drugs. Right. So, you're on the side of a road, you see a suspicious powder and you want an accurate measurement right away. You don't want to, you're still going to send it away to the formal lab and wait 3 days. But, this isn't the 80s where you can kind of dip your pinky in a white substance and put it on your tongue and say, oh, this is, you're going to die if you do stuff like that.
Yeah.
Sort of joking there a little bit. But the point is, these things are very serious. And in our instrument, which is a miniaturized version of the large instruments that everybody trusts, in 15 seconds, you can get a preliminary answer on, this is fentanyl in here. And then you can do what you need to do as the formal process plays out. So there's an example of a cool application that we've succeeded at already, and we're doing many of those. Another one is, and this is one that I didn't anticipate when I founded the company, bunker fuel on cargo ships. I never thought one of our instruments that we would sell would be on a cargo ship, but we have a publicly announced partnership with Bosch, the large German company that makes everything from e-bikes to dishwashers, approached us one day and said, yeah, there's a need for about 100,000 of these units to go on cargo ships to analyze bunker fuel. So I never thought our instruments would be on cargo ships, but lo and behold, a pretty important industrial technology leader in the world approached us with the opportunity to do that type of an application. So I could go on and on about the different types of applications that partners and customers are interested in.
Let's talk a little bit about being an entrepreneur, Sean. You've been at this for a little while now. Along your entrepreneurial journey, what were some of the key things that you've learned from different areas, whether it be people or examples of other entrepreneurs or reading certain books? Where have you sought, wisdom and advice from?
Yeah, well, I'm definitely still seeking lots of wisdom, that's for sure. I never intended to be an entrepreneur, to be honest. Of course, my dream was to be a hockey player.
Yeah.
Like a lot of Canadian boys, I started playing hockey very early, and probably not like a lot of Canadian boys. And I don't tell this part of the story very often. I also wanted to be a figure skater.
Oh, wow.
So my dad had me into hockey and my mom had me into figure skating. She really got me interested in watching a Canadian figure skating legend named Paul Cranston. Some of you might remember Paul. And so, and also Brian Pokar, God rest his soul.
Yeah.
So I had this dream. I was going to be the first person to make it in the Olympics in figure skating and hockey at the same time. So eventually the figure skating dream died, but the hockey dream actually lingered for quite a while. And so I devoted my whole life pretty much to being on the ice, whether it was trying to land an axel or my double toe loop or trying to make plays in hockey. So it wasn't really up until, the dream died when I was about 20 years old after giving it my best shot and basically not being good enough. I decided to be an engineer just because my dad was an engineer. And so no real intentions to being an entrepreneur. But, one of the things I learned actually from my hockey career, and which is absolutely a requirement in being an entrepreneur, is perseverance. So you really cannot get down about the ebbs and flows of how things go in a particular game or in a particular week in the business world. You have to have your sights set on a vision. And you just have to persevere through all the ups and downs. And so probably the biggest thing that I think is that I've learned, and that is a necessity, at least for me anyways, has been perseverance.
Okay, we're going to go down memory lane a little bit here. And I don't know if you remember, but I remember as a young reporter with the Calgary Herald in the mid 80s, I was a sports writer, and one of my beats in the mid 80s was the Calgary Wranglers of the Western Hockey League, and that's where you played, right? And I'm trying to remember those years. Like, who was the coach at that time?
One of the coaches that I remember was Wally Kozak. Again, God rest his soul, and he was a fabulous gentleman, very insightful. Really just a great guy all around, actually. And another man that year the Wranglers weren't very good, probably because I was playing for them. But that year I think we had a couple of coaches and another fine gentleman named Hank Bassett.
Yes,
Was
former NHLer, right, and goalie with the Pittsburgh Penguins, I recall correctly.
Yeah, really nice man, and he took control of the bench during that year as well. So it was a little bit tumultuous, but I remember you actually. And it's interesting that you brought that up, but I remember you working for the Calgary Herald, but I'd sort of lost track of that. You, I think, maybe cut your teeth as a sports writer. So thanks for reminding me about that.
Yeah, and I remember those years because that team, and I don't know if you were part of the transition in coaching, but you did mention Wally, Hank Bassett. At some point, there was a guy named Sandy Huckle, and they were all kind of like the how should I put it? Like the really nice coaches, but then one year they brought in, and I don't know if you played for John Chapman.
Chappie was a little bit of a tough cookie.
Yeah, and so that was like a transition between the really easygoing types to the really hard nosed, right? And from then you played at the University of Calgary, and then you were drafted by the LA Kings. Tell me a little bit about your story and hockey of what happened then.
Sure. So just to get the chronology right, I did play for the University of Calgary, but at that point, my career was done. I had already retired, and I was just having fun at UC. I was doing my engineering degree.
Yeah.
But when I still had a chance, I did play for the Calgary Wranglers, and I also played for the Spokane Chiefs.
Yes.
In Spokane, I played with guys like Brent Gilchrist and Mick Vakota, just incredible hockey players that had a quite an impressive stint in the NHL. But when I was done with that, during that time, I got drafted by the Los Angeles Kings, and I signed a contract and I played in their farm system for a couple of years. And at that time, their farm team was in New Haven, Connecticut, where I had a really amazing opportunity to play with a guy by the name of Kenny Baumgartner, WHL legend and just an amazing guy, really smart guy too. But then I, not really that interesting, wasn't that good. Had a couple kind of, I guess, good periods or whatever, but wasn't that good. And so that part of it is sort of boring. But, and I always tell this part of the story. I hope nobody's listening to this is kind of getting sick of me telling this story. But what was interesting about that time was not my part of it, but those were the Wayne Gretzky years in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
So I got to go to training camp with Wayne Gretzky. I faced off against Wayne Gretzky in scrimmage. I've sat beside him on the bench, and one time he said, "How you doing, kid?" I said, "Good." And so that was really amazing, like to be on the ice with him, and he, like with the movie star kind of aura that he had.
Yeah,
he was, in those days he was scoring like 210 points a year. People don't remember that one human being used to do that. So I was just in awe, and he was such a nice guy and funny guy and everything. And the kind of joke part of the story that I always tell is, I've showered with Wayne Gretzky, and stuff like that. And so anyway, that was a really interesting time for me. I learned a lot, and just in awe of, again, like a movie star like personality in hockey. So just really a fabulous experience that I got to go through. And then, just before I was done and, went back to school and started living real life.
What do you think from that experience and sort of rubbing shoulders with a legend like that? What do you think you learned that carries through with you to this day?
You know what? And it wasn't just Wayne Gretzky. It was other people that sort of had the Midas touch. I don't know if you remember Luc Robitaille.
I certainly do. One of my favorite television shows is called Bones, and Luc Robitaille shows up in one of the episodes of this, where the main character has a concussion and he's dreaming, and Luc Robitaille comes to him. So I definitely remember Luc.
Yeah, no, and I remember being on the ice with Luke, and him take a pass in the high slot and just roof a snapshot underneath the bar, and then Wayne would be dangling around out there. So probably what I learned more from them is what I'm not. I don't think I actually learned anything directly from them of things that I would want to apply, but rather just a clear contrast of, okay, there seems to be these people that have these special talents, can do all these incredible things, and I'm just not one of them. So I'm going to have to really grind it out. And that's probably one reason why I didn't succeed in my hockey career, is that I wasn't enough of a grinder. And so in my business career, I definitely am a grinder. I definitely have said, okay, if I'm going to succeed in the business world, I'm not going to succeed as a Luc Robitaille or a Wayne Gretzky. I'm going to have to be more like a Bobby Clark type of a character if I have any chance. And that sort of dovetails into my comment before about perseverance and so on. So that's kind of the approach that I've taken to my business career. And I continue to do that today.
Super. Well, thanks very much, Sean. That was excellent. I appreciate taking the time to talk to us today.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Thanks very much, Mario.
Okay, super. That was Sean Krakiwsky, President and CEO of Nanalysis in Calgary. This has been Calgary's podcast with Mario Toneguzzi on Canada's Podcast Network. Thanks for joining us today.